I don't know why people always look at what's different about you, not what's similar.
Hi, welcome to Norwegian Newcomers, the podcast where we hear fragments from the lives of Norway's immigrant population. My name is Vedrana Tanovic, and in today's episode, we'll hear about moving often.
There's not a lot of people that move so much, but I would be 3 months here, 1 month there, a year there, really frequently, my whole childhood.
Living in 3 different countries.
So I really don't have roots, where I'm like, oh, this is where I feel at home.
As well as what it feels like to be an outsider in each of those countries.
It's like when I'm in the States, that's the Norwegian guy. Or when I'm in Norway, that's the American guy.
This is Miika's story. Miika, how are you?
Hi, thank you. I'm good. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Before we start talking about your life in Norway, please, can you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Sure. I'm a dual citizen. I'm born in Norway, but I have an American mother, Norwegian father. Moved around a lot. My childhood is in Italy for about 10 years. And then I've lived in the States for 20 years maybe, or something like that. Norway, 20, about roughly. I'm 47 now, so it's been a lot of back and forth. And my background is in sales, is in a lot of music industry that I've worked in. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I came back to Norway for the last time in 2008, 9, and I've been here since then.
So the country that you are born is
Norway. I'm born about a half hour from Oslo, out in the station before Asker. It's called Høen, and there used to be a birthing home there, which is where I was born.
Okay, and then how many years you spent in Norway?
Almost none. We moved real quick. I mean, I was out when I was 2, and then I left, I think, when I was 4, done. But I've been back and forth, more than you can imagine, right? Driving up and down from Italy in a truck, it takes 3 days, but bang, bang, up and down. So we'd do that. And I would fly back and forth a lot, too, to visit family. When you're a child, you adapt really quickly. So it's, it was challenging. Italy, 70s, it was pretty traditional. The other kids didn't really like new kids coming into the village. I lived in small places, not like a city. I moved to a village in Tuscany with 150 people. So it was a very small community, really traditional, really very different. No TVs, no telephones, no washing machines, no cars, nothing. So things were very different. Coming from a place like Oslo, which was very different then than it is now, but still, it was a big city compared to Italy, or to Tuscany at least. The closest big city was Carrara, which is where the marble is. That's why we moved there, was for the marble. You run around, you play a little soccer. I hate soccer, but everybody in Italy's got to play soccer. I learned Italian, and good food, good people, good community. I liked it there, everything except for the challenges. There was a lot of racism and a lot of skepticism towards outsiders. And it's a big part of the culture over there still, I think. But aside from that, man, I met great people, made great friends, had great experiences. I grew up there around art, around painters, sculptors, musicians, writers, intellectuals. My parents were artists, or my mother and her new man then at the time, after leaving my father, became a sculptor. And through that process of becoming a sculptor, moving from wood to stone to Norway's granite, which is really hard, and then eventually moving to marble, which is soft to work with. And then we moved to Italy for the marble. So obviously we moved to Carrara, which is where the marble. It's where Michelangelo took his blocks. Black David came out of that mountain, and that's the place. Now it's empty. There's no more marble. But that's why we went there. So that's kind of the environment that I grew up in there, with artists from all over the world, like Russians, Americans, Germans, from all over, Polish.
Through the art, you get used, and from the early years, how it is being around multicultural environment.
Yeah, extremely so, because I moved so much back and forth between these 3 countries that are all very different. I mean, Norway, Italy, and the United States, extremely different cultures, all of them. And then living in an environment where the adults around me, at least, not the children, but the adults around me were very, very international. They had all come there because because that place, Tuscany, has been an artist center for decades and decades, not only sculpture, but a lot. So a lot of artists have moved there, and lived there and worked there. And so that was the environment. All these different backgrounds and all these different perspectives on these discussions they would have about literature and philosophy and, politics. There's not a lot of people that move so much, but like, I would be 3 months here, 1 month there, a year there. It was really frequently my whole childhood and a lot of my teenage years. So I really don't have like roots. I'm always an outsider. No matter where I am, I'm an outsider. It's like when I'm in the States, that's the Norwegian guy. Or when I'm in Norway, that's the American guy. Or when I'm in Italy, it's the same. I don't know why people always look at what's different about you, not what's similar, right? I guess I've thought about it in terms of just a philosophical question, what it means to belong or to not be accepted, And obviously being white is a huge advantage, right? Even being white coming to Italy as a kid, every day the boys would beat me up after school and throw me in the trash can because I'm the foreigner, right? Even being white. Now, if I was black, the situation would have been much tougher.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, I definitely was Italian. Like you could not tell that I wasn't Italian, short of the fact that I had like blonde hair. Now I have almost black hair. It's gone, but so I didn't look very, very Italian, but I definitely was Italian. I mean, when you're 4, 5, 6, you're just shaped. You know what I mean? Like you're shaped by your home, your parents, and your environment, and whatever you brought with you. But like, of course, you kind of naturally fall into the environment you're in, and you learn what they do. So I was and I still am very Italian, like because those childhood years are very formative. When I talk, I get passionate, I get intense about it. I use my body. I'm very, so like here in Norway. I'm always too much. My wife's coming over and telling me I'm making people uncomfortable. And I'm kind of like, get out of my house then, if you don't want to hang out and be with the people you're here with. But that bothers me, not from the sense of like, I like loudness, but in the sense of like, I think it's important for people to be who they are and to be able to be together as different people who they are. Without this, we have to be so careful with everybody's freaking feelings at any given moment that we just have to become like, you kill humanity that way because nothing develops, right? Nothing is challenged. No ideas are really exchanged. This is so nice, isn't it? Yes. Okay. Well, there it is, right? What's interesting about that? What's going to come out of that? Nothing, right? You'll just eat cake and drink your coffee and go home and and that's boring, right? And then you die, right? So, I mean, what's the point? There are challenges as far as the ways in which we behave, ways in which we think and approach things, moral things, philosophical things. I mean, culture is I'm not religious, but culture, religion, history, these things, depending on your perspective on a situation, and that has a lot to do with where you come from and the culture you grew up in. And, I mean, we ended up where we ended up in Italy because it was in Carrara, but it was the cheapest place to live, right? We didn't have any money. I mean, globally speaking, yeah, we're in the, upper, but like, as far as being white in Europe, we were freaking poor, like legitimately poor. So from Italy, moving to the US, we moved to Northern Virginia because my stepfather at the time had family there who could kind of help get us started a little bit. About 10 minutes out of DC, Reston, Virginia, which is such a contrast, like culturally, it's such a culture shock. It's so much the complete opposite and antithesis of everything that was going on in Tuscany.
How that influenced your life? What kind of life you started living there?
I didn't fit in, but I never really, I was used to not fitting in because I was always the new kid, right? Like we moved so much. By the time you make some friends, you're gone. But I didn't really fit in because, U.S. culture is very like, what can I say? Religion is a big deal, which it was in Italy too, but in a completely different way. Sports is a huge thing. And I suck at sports. Well, as far as like team sports, things with balls and these kind of things, not good. I'm good at like skiing, biking, but like, so all the baseball and the football and all that stuff, like I sucked at it. I was terrible. I was a little better at football because I have a little weight and I can push people around, but like I was terrible. And like, so that's where you really make friends in the States, right? Is through sports as a boy. And I tried that. I tried the Boy Scouts. I got kicked out of Boy Scouts. Who gets kicked out of Boy Scouts? Because of the religion. I got kicked out of Boy Scouts because I'm not religious. The Boy Scouts is a religious organization. So there's a bunch of God in there. And I have questions, which was a problem in Italy too, which is super Catholic. Like I said, it was an intellectual home. I was read to from like Hindu texts, the Bible, the Quran. So like I had questions, right? When they talk about things, I'm like, well, what about that? Or like, and in Italy, the solution was just to beat the kids with the stick, like with these on the hands, this thing. This is a long time ago, but they might even still do it. I don't know for the mountains there, but it was Catholic school, nuns, like they, dressed in black. It was deadly freaking serious, everything, like, and so coming to the US, I still had the same question because nobody answers your questions, right? So they're still there. So I asked the questions when these things come up. And they just didn't want to deal with it. So they literally said, and I'm not saying that that's a standard response from the Boy Scout organization or anything, but like at least whoever the troop leader was there just told me to leave. And I had to walk out.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to Norwegian Newcomers and remind you that if you want to further support our podcast, we have a Patreon. There you will get every episode 1 week before everyone else. And we will be able to continue with this project that we really love. You can find us at patreon.com/Norwegian Newcomers, or you can press the link in the episode description. Thank you very much. It really would mean a lot. How you felt in that time? How that for a little boy?
It was a cultural shock in so many ways. Even bringing my dog, right, who was my best friend in Italy, like that's who I pretty much hung out with most of the time was my dog. I would just take off and go out into the mountains and we would have adventures and stuff, and there, I never owned a leash in my life, right? There's no poop bags and leashes and there's none of that, right? My dog was a literal street dog. Like they let me keep one of the dogs they roam around the mountains and in nights they form packs and they howl and it's not cool. Like, packs of dogs can get a little dangerous. So like, they used to kill the puppies because there's too many and there's no money to neuter any, you know what I mean? It's like 70s in Italy up in the mountains. So I got to keep, my dog was Teddy. And like, so because Carolinian Lady was like special dogs, so I could pick one who survived. That was my dog. And I brought him to the US and there, we lived in an apartment in like a real crappy neighborhood. Reston is pretty wealthy area, but we didn't, we were in the cockroach neighborhoods, like, and there, Teddy was miserable. He hated it there. You have to have leashes everywhere. You have to, be inside. He's not used to being inside. Never been inside, so just so many things were so different. Everything's car in the States. You drive everywhere. The food's different. Everything's different. Everybody's got TVs and video games. And I didn't have a TV till I was 13. I've never owned a video game. I was in the mountains, like taking acorns and sticking twigs in them and making lions and stuff. And like, that's what I was doing. I was fantasizing. I'd pick the stick and I was a knight fighting dragons or, like I was doing that kind of stuff. I come over there. It's either sports or video games. It's very different. It's a very different culture. And also like Italy is traditional. The US is like guns blazing, go get money. It's very money focused. And then Norway, you're not supposed to make any noise, right? You're not supposed, preferably you should never get noticed by anybody in any time in your whole life. That would be fantastic. I am exaggerating, but it's like, it's not being modest. It's a requirement. Like it's a requirement for politeness almost. Like it's a similar thing to politeness. It's etiquette. It's etiquette. Like you can do it, but you can't say that you did it, right? You can't feel good about the fact that you did it. Like you can't be proud of it. You got to be like, oh, it's just another day, just going to work. Like, oh, it's no big. Oh no, really? You think it's nice? I guess it's okay. It's like that kind of. And I'm like, why, right? Which is insane, right? And also the U.S. side of it, which is the complete opposite, which is like, oh, I've achieved nothing, but I'm the best in the world. I'm king of the world. That's the U.S. Like, oh my God. working with music in the US, and like we ran 2 studios in Atlanta, Georgia for 3 years, and like had tons of artists in there, and and everybody there is the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? I worked in hip hop, which is the most extreme of that. Like everybody is just, I am the absolute genius of all. I am the best rapper on the planet Earth. All of them, everyone, like, which was like, okay, it's good to be confident, but and they weren't all the best in the world. They weren't. Some of them were great. Some of them were awful, and some of them were okay. And some, but it's a cultural thing, and not just with hip hop. But I mean, it doesn't come from hip hop at all. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with American culture. I mean, you can look at historically, and you can go in depth in different groups or demographics, or the history is different for, America is a unique place. 300 million people from all over the planet with all their cultures and all their history and all their mashed together.
I connected that a bit with, and I would like to hear your opinion, that I would say that Norway today, or at least those years that I spent here, 6 years, it's quite influenced by America.
Being an American and spending probably the bulk of my life here, I think by now with this last period, like this is the place where I've lived the most time. And like I've been here, I was born here in 1974. In 1974, the US was the greatest place on earth, right? It was. We had won the war, kind of. We really came in and took the glory of it. But after the Second World War, the U.S. was fantastic, and everybody loves the U.S. And then the oil came here, and the U.S. came in with all their expertise and helped to make Norway rich, right? So, like, I've lived here from the time when it was the coolest thing to be American, and everybody loved you, to a point where, like, I didn't really bring up the fact that I was American anymore, because, I mean, I guess after everything that's happened politically, especially after 9/11 and all that, it's just gotten so weird, and so many ugly things have been done. And it's not like those things weren't being done before, but it's getting harder to hide things, right? So more people know about more things, and so if you were in a social environment and you were American, you'd be challenged, which is okay for me. Like I'm not opposed to challenge. Like I can handle a challenge, but like. It was different. It used to be fantastic to be American, and then it became something that was like not so great anymore to be American, right? You were a materialist, you were a capitalist, you were a part of corruption, you were a part of like ignorance, you were a part of violence, you were a part of like all the Bushes and the like all these things that is never going to be the same. The U.S. changed from being like optimistic and like driven and like to being very fearful and very like skeptical and very separate and very I go back there now and it's a very different place. Like the main thing I've noticed about being American in Norway is the change from it being a positive to a negative. I look at like the cult. I can see very clearly like the things that we aspire to here from American culture, and it's none of the good. It's all of the bad. Unfortunately, you have much more corporate money. You have an elevation of political donations, which has never been seen before in Norway. You didn't have that before, like that type of money rolling around for election time. It wasn't like that. Now it is. Now it's much more a U.S. way of doing things. You have a lot of privatization going on. You have a lot more outsourcing going on. You have a lot, we're exporting all our energies. We're doing, there's a lot of stuff going on. The problem is that we don't learn from any of the lessons, right? Like we look at the U.S. and we're like, oh, we want that, we want that, we want that. But we don't look at what the consequences were of getting that, right? And how they got it and how that played out. Mm-hmm. That would be smart, right? Like I want that, but let me see how they did it. Let me see what they did well and what they did poorly. So let me do it better, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, we follow suit. we try to do what they did, I think.
I would say that for me, it looks like Norway just slowly going from socialism to capitalism.
That's my impression. I don't know if that's really true. And I definitely am not knowledgeable enough in everything that happens here to know that that's the truth. That's what we're doing. But like, that's my impression, you know. Just look at the news, right? Just look at TV programming, for example. It's right there on the wall, and most homes have one, right? And they spend a lot of time looking at it. And kids look at it, and everybody looks at it, and everybody, you know, and a lot of people, unfortunately, get their knowledge from that or from YouTube. But and that's a different discussion. But looking at the difference in the way programming was done, okay, just the way the news is presented is more and more becoming similar and more similar to the way news is presented in the U.S. It's never quite as extreme because we're always at least 10 years behind. But we're trailing, right? We're trailing, and you can see the increase in violence and sex, and you know all the in programming and more dramatic, and it's more, you know, all these things. It means a lot. Just the difference now, walking around Oslo, you know, you'll see 5 Ferraris driving around. Everybody's got a Tesla. Like now the kids are walking around with very, very pricey clothing. Why? Right? Why would you put a 30,000 crown watch on a 16, 17-year-old kid? Or right? Why? Like, what are you teaching that kid? And more, it's becoming this really focus on you're supposed to get rich and you're supposed to be beautiful, and you have a very clear package for what is a successful, happy life. I see it in the forest. I love to hike. I love being in the woods. I never had to do this when I was a kid or when I was a teenager. But now I have to bring 2 extra plastic bags to pick up all the trash that people are throwing out there. You know, like if you don't go out there, you don't notice that. You don't think about that. But that's a pretty big deal. Just the fact of like, I see a shift globally, like where we care less about each other and more about ourselves. I just do. It's a psychological thing, but it's like when you can live a life where you can do whatever you want at any given moment. Like you can just do what you want to do for you. That it's not okay, right? It's okay to do for you as long as you're also thinking about the whole, right? As long as you're thinking about your neighbor, as long as you care, as long as you have empathy for other people, and you consider like, okay, I want to do this, and this is the result and consequence for me, okay? But you also have to think about, okay, that's great, and I'm going to do that. Okay, but before you do it, just think about what's the consequence for your neighbor, for example, or your coworker, or your friend who's coming with you on that trip, or your, you know what I mean? Just that kind of, there's less and less of that. You can just see it in these these little scooters around town, right? They're super cool, right? You hop on them, cool. But then comes the old lady, right? With her walker. She's going to the store and she can't, and she falls off the curb because people just like, same with the trash. They don't think about each other. Like, we're not in touch with how lucky we really are, okay, in this world. So we're losing through that process. I think we're losing some of our core values, which are some of the most beautiful parts about our culture.
But do you think that will maybe change? Or I have some hope.
I think it's going to get worse.
Okay.
No, I think it's going to get much. I think, do you want to know the truth? I think we're doomed. Humanity will not survive. That's what I believe. We're done. We've been done. We're way past the tipping point. It's going to be over with. Cockroaches are going to take over one day, and it's going to be great. But that's what I really believe. So I don't think we're headed in a good direction. I think that it is changing, but it's not changing for the better. We talk about our agreements and our goals and our for this and that, but like we do whatever we want to do as long as it's increasing our margin, and that's the truth of it. You know, we talk about all these great and beautiful things we want to do, but when the decision making time comes, we're like, oh, that's going to cost me that much more. I'm going to lose that much money doing that. You know what? I'm going to wait until I have to. It looks good, right? Everything's looking good, right? We got shiny rims on our cars, but the oil's dripping out of the engine and the brakes are shot, but it's polished on the outside. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the U.S. But here, we just follow after that. So, like, for example, the food industry here. Why do you think it's the same thing in every freaking store? Because there's only 2 giant chains that own all of the grocery stores, right?
Yeah.
I think in closing, like, this is about different cultures. Culture is a history of interaction with a group of people, right? And so interaction and communication is really what culture comes out of, right? All the challenges that you go through, all the, the survival, the food, all these, building and crushing and all these things that you do through centuries and centuries, right? Like, and that's interesting. Before, the differences have kind of been greater, I think. That's the upside of all this tech, right? It comes with challenges. It becomes harder to be like, when's the last time somebody spent some silence with themselves? That doesn't really happen too much anymore. The plus side is that you're actually seeing different faces, different thoughts, different cultures, people from different countries. You are seeing this. Now, are they doing stuff of value? Not so much. I think for the most part, it's cat videos and bullshit. But we are in contact. Maybe that's maybe that can change. Maybe that can become something where we actually do exchange more and more real information and real thoughts. And, when I was a kid, the only way you could experience a different culture, a different country was to go there, right? Like literally travel there. That's what you did. Even when I was talking to my mother in the US, or my father in Norway, or it was a telephone call, which cost, $50 per second, right? So you were all just like, oh, hi, hello, hi, I love you so much, I love you, bye, right? Like, that's the way it was, right? And he was like, okay, you ready? 1, 2, 3. So now, when we start actually communicating about real things, then as a tool, our tech can be amazing as far as understanding each other culturally and being able to have identities in more places and becoming more one, that's a positive, that's something I look at as a possibly positive progression,
And speaking of that, Miika, I dare you that soon as possible we should meet live and to blend our friends in some kind of party, and then to make environment for ourselves to be loud and to discuss and to confront.
Yeah, I would like that.
We can just call our listeners to have an open, if they want to comment on this episode, or if they have any questions, or if they want to have quality discussions, please write on our Instagram or Facebook. Miika, thank you very much. Say hello to Gladys.
I will.
And we can say that in case someone didn't hear the first season, that they should, because there's Miika's wife, Gladys episode in the first season. And I think it could be interesting for listeners to hear both stories or both episodes. And
true.
And thank you again.
It was fun. It was my pleasure. And I got to talk all the time, which is what I like to do.
Yeah. Take care. This episode was made possible with support from Bergis and Steve Telson and our members on Patreon. If you would like to support our podcast, search for Norwegian Newcomers on Patreon, Facebook, or Instagram. We are back next Tuesday. Thank you for listening and take care.